Welcome back to the TowerCast Podcast, the Italian podcast for the Italian filmmaker of El Paso and the world. We are here at the Las Cruces International Film Festival, and we've just been having a blast talking to amazing storytellers. And our special guest for this episode is nothing short of that. And before I introduce him, I got to introduce my fellow co-host, Mr. John Eric Castro.
I give you the actor's perspective and acting questions.
Mr. Michael Lowe.
Here to give you the cinematography perspective for today.
And I'm your humble film servant, Carlos de la Torre, giving you a writing, directing perspective. Thank you to Austin Young, making sure we're sounding good back there. And wow, I can't say enough. There's way too much to talk about and not enough time to talk about the filmography, the storytelling contributions, and just all of the plethora of knowledge that I'm sure you've gained in this. We have Mr. Giancarlo Esposito on the podcast today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Las Cruces again and back to New Mexico. I mean, I know you have quite a history here, but the biggest thing we like to kick off with the podcast is tell us about your storytelling journey. How did that begin? What made you want to become a storyteller?
I began as an actor, and so that's a translator or someone who channels the material that the writer has written. Oh. And that's very, very important for me to honor the writer's intention. So whether it be, and I started in theater, I started doing musical comedy when I was 7.5, 8 years old. And so that's one form of expression that is dear to me. Sure. I then transferred into doing straight dramas where the story was a little bit more focused in regard to the human experience in a drama. And then I realized that I had the ability from my observations and from the experience I had from being an actor to tell a story myself. But what would that story be? Many came to me and asked me to direct different pieces of material. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And I noticed that the trend toward violent material was prevalent. And so I got opportunities, but those opportunities were chock full of violent films. And I wanted to be more profound, more provocative in my storytelling. And so I started to be open to look for something that may be a dramatic, comedic, and something a little more, fluid.
Now, is this where your work with Spike comes in to play a little bit? Or
I had worked with Spike prior to that and enjoyed all of my films with him, and was very inspired by the way he told his stories. He told them from a standpoint of justice, human justice and human rights for every man. I was inspired by the lack of films about the everyman. Films have to have a hero component to follow the lead in the film and follow the course of that character's journey. You want to be able to root for someone.
Sure.
I mean, that's natural storytelling. But I found that the folks we were rooting for in film didn't exemplify the everyday man or the every woman. And so I started by telling my very first film called Gospel Hill was the story of everyday people who really were dealing with loss and trauma. One was dealing with the loss of his father in a very small town, who was a great civil rights leader, who was assassinated, and the sheriff, who was still alive, had something to do with it. So it was a story loosely based on the Medgar Evers story, and it had people coming together in the end, understanding where they were complicit in this man's murder, and understanding that they had it wrong, and had an opportunity and a moment in the movie to see that they could get it right. They could make a correction. So that was my first film. And then the film that we're showing tonight here at the Las Cruces International Film Festival is a film that is called The Show. And it was originally titled This Is Your Death, about basically an everyman couldn't make ends meet and had to find a way to support his family and survive, and have them survive even after he's gone. So a very provocative movie, again, that was focused on telling the story of an everyman, a guy who was a janitor, who's a dishwasher, did anything he could to make ends meet. And I those are the stories I like, because I think that we as human beings don't often enough, we see hero stories, and I love some of the things I've been able to do. The story in Breaking Bad of Walter White, to play a nefarious character like Gustavo Fring was great to me. But again, Gustavo was a guy who was a businessman. The idea that we as human beings have to fulfill our destinies as we meet them.
I'm sorry, I'd love to know. I love that that's been your trajectory and that's been your focus. Now, how does something like that, would you say, transfers into something, or translates rather into something like The Mandalorian? I mean, that's obviously quite literally a different world, but it's a much bigger story to tell as well.
It is a much larger story, and what I like about Mandalorian, and Jon Favreau wrote the role of Moff Gideon for me. I enjoyed the earlier Star Wars movies where they were connected to mythology, connected to great storytelling. We're in a land in New Mexico where there are so many stories of Anastasia, stories of indigenous people, the area of Chaco, people don't realize that had, 5 stories?
Right.
That was a modern ancient society that thrived here. So to be aware of our own history, Chimayo, all these places that are so sacred here to New Mexicans. Many younger New Mexicans think they're just linked to religion or to spirituality, but they're linked to a way of life. The Pueblos linked to a way of life, family, connection. And so in the world of Mandalorian, what drew me was that the story is mythological, and then it drew it harkened back to the relationship, and people don't really know, some do, that George Lucas had with a mythologist, Joseph Campbell.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey. So the story is really, the hero and heroine's journey is important for all of us. Those are stories that were built and made to inspire us.
Absolutely.
So, if you looked at it in that way, Moff Gideon is half of Mandalorian.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? So Mandalorian is trying to overcome the dark side of himself that's resisting the mission because he wants to have nothing to do with this child, right? It's a mythological story. And so if you look at it that way, then you see growth and you start to mirror and see, oh, that's the part of me that doesn't want to get up tomorrow to go do what I have to do because I have to do that for a year to get where I want to go, right? That's your sacrifice.
Sure.
I mean, it's so interesting to hear how much care you have for the art form and for storytelling. To bring it back a little bit, was there an inspiration that you had or a mentor or a movie you saw that convinced you this is a path that you wanted to take in your own life?
I started so young that I knew I was an entertainer. I didn't, and I knew I always wanted to make it to dramatic acting. Because when I came up having brown skin, I was relegated to do certain things.
Absolutely.
And I was always, the guy who had to rob the old lady or, shoot the teenager or rob the liquor store.
And predominantly in New York, right, was where you were raised. So these stories were very prevalent.
Very prevalent. And there was nothing else available. And so I developed a sense of dignity for myself and learned how to put that dignity away, put it in a drawer, and be the tough guy. And scare people, right? Sure. And so, and I did that because that was my route to making a living and having the ability to get work.
Right.
But as soon as I could really start to harness all of my capacities, I started to realize I had to be the example to teach folks who wanted to hire me.
Sure.
I would literally go in and I'd read for one role. I'd say, well, how about this role? Like I read for that and they were like, yeah.
Oh, really?
But I go, but how about that role? Well, that's not really a black guy. That's okay.
But it's still, you're trying,
Right? And so people were a little bit baffled by my questioning of them. It's like going to a job interview and them asking you all kinds of questions.
Right.
And then you answer the questions and you're just waiting for them to say, yeah, you're hired. And then you sit there and you scratch your head and you go, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, what does your company have to offer me?
Turn it over to them.
Right. Because, it's a collaboration. Filmmaking is a collaboration.
Absolutely.
Working for someone is a collaboration.
And you've got to work with a lot of fantastic people, but voices both young and on the older side. For instance, I know, the announcements have been made that you're working with Coppola at the moment and also working on Maxine, who's just announced, the third installment of that series. What's that difference like? I mean, you come from working with people like Spike Lee to Coppola to Jon Favreau. But these are different voices, very, very different voices.
Part of my success is working in different genres with different voices. And so there's different ways of making film. And Maxine, I'm excited about because it's a genre I haven't really done before. It's that edgy horror genre in a way, but the script was so good. Again, the story was great.
Sure.
Ty West wrote a great script and asked me to play a role to begin with that was, on the surface quite mundane. I had done it before. before. And so I didn't want to lead him on. I said, I'm really not interested in that through my people really gracefully and gently. Although I wanted to work with Ty.
Right.
Because I felt like the character he asked me to play, I could fulfill it easily in my sleep.
Yeah. It wasn't challenging for you as an actor, as a storyteller.
And so through the course of events, another role came about, which I thought was really fun and really interesting and more impactful within the story. And I want to have an impact.
Sure.
And so, unlike many actors, we take roles because, hey, it's Ty West or hey, it's Coppola.
Sure.
I want to know that I can contribute.
Sure.
Right.
That's massive.
How do you go from all that to video games?
Oh man, here again, I'm full of wonder and enchantment and joy, and I'm inquisitive. I had never done a video game.
Yeah.
Is it a lot? Is it?
Oh
more?
man, I'm acting with a belt of equipment around my waist, with every part of my articulated body marked by sensors, with a helmet on, with lights right here in my face, right where the microphone is, and a camera right here as well, having to relate to you through that and give all my expressions so it's recording it in a room with 100 cameras all around me. So you have to forget all that. I remember the first day I was like, this is going to be impossible.
How am I going to forget this?
It's going to be impossible. And then as I got used to it, I realized I'm in a room with nothing. They create the chair, they create the table.
Your imagination is
Yeah.
what drives everything.
And so I figured just go back to your theater training. Be in a black box theater, say the lines to someone who's standing there, look through, the light and through the camera and be real. And I had a ball because it was freeing, actually.
Sure.
There were no tangible things I had to hold on to.
They need to get you in the next Avatar. In that case, you're a master at this now. Now you can. Jim,
I just met him too
did you?
at the SAG Awards. Yeah, he was
Okay.
excited to meet me. So
Awesome.
maybe that'll come true.
Absolutely. I mean, now I'd love to get your perspective on one of the major things that we ask here is just what would you say to storytellers around you? You yourself have directed, as you've mentioned.
But honest.
Yeah,
None of
honest.
this cliche like.
What is some advice you can give
What's
to
cliche to
storytellers?
you? He's like,
Keep going. Don't ever stop. Which is true.
all that's true. And if you're committed and you really want to do it, you know that that's something that you can never forget. What I would say is tell the story that's personal to you.
Yes.
And so we all have, dark and light in our backgrounds. We all have come from families of origins that were out of the ordinary or maybe different, and we're afraid to share some of that for fear that people will judge us or say, oh man, you come from a family, right? But those are the stories, if they contributed to your growth, that we really want to know.
Right.
And so tell your personal story, no matter how much it may make you feel awkward or how much it may expose you. But that's the connected tissue that is interesting.
Yeah.
And so, we all try to think up a story that the audience is going to love. Why not think up a story that's really personal to you? I do stories that exorcise demons. Right? I do stories that reveal like part of my background. And that is what really connects you and galvanizes you.
And no one could
tell
tell
your story is what I'm
right.
saying.
No one could tell that story better than you. Right?
No one.
Yeah.
It's so very personal, but believe it or not, you don't think that people may understand or really relate to it. You're going to be shocked at how many people go, oh man, I went through that.
Exactly.
And they can, on a different level, in a different situation, in a different country, in a different language.
Right. Absolutely.
But still,
Because it's all the human condition. Yeah.
it's the human condition. And then your story is going to be true and honest and real, not pretentious and made up and fake.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be great at
If you have
creating something. Be original,
the original.
is what I'd say.
That's
Be
amazing.
original. Be personal.
Original.
Last question for you, because I know you're getting pulled in different directions here, and we appreciate the time. But can you tell me a little bit on your end? What's a film of yours, a work of yours that you really hold close to your heart?
Oh, that's a good question.
And something perhaps that you haven't played yet that you'd love
Maybe
to play.
a hidden gem that.
Well, this film tonight that's showing called The Show is close to my heart.
Okay.
It exemplifies a time in my life where I wanted to take my own life because I was bankrupt. And I had, at that time, I had 4 kids. And I just didn't know how I'd ever dig out of my bankruptcy. I owed over $1 million. And I thought the only way to do it is to figure out how to off myself so my family could survive. So that's the truth. That's very special for me because, and I was also told by people, a person that I know, that you're never going to recover from this, ever. And I had to find the strength to say, if there's one industry where I can recover, it's the one I'm in. And that means I have to bank on me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you bank on you and you know, and people ask me now, did you know that you were going to be a pop star icon? Did you know? I said, like I always knew I was going to make it because I love what I do. And I wasn't trying to make it. I was trying to survive.
Yeah.
So my thing now, I tell my kids, okay, look, survive.
Yeah.
Survive. Get that survival mode.
That's the name of the game. My third child says to me, she says, Papa, you grind it. You grind it. She said, I got my work ethic from you. I said, that's because I had to survive. And in surviving, the only way to survive is doing something you love to do.
Absolutely.
And believe in yourself.
And believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And it turned, and the flower opened, and now I apply that to everything I do. And it's really important to me to pick a project and take something that I connect to, that I love.
Yep.
Well, we can only hope as storytellers that we can develop something that appeals to those sensibilities, and we can have you into one of our projects and work with you and really connect on those levels.
I think you're smart guys. You're very intelligent, smart, wise, and have beautiful countenances and spirits. So make it right. Bring it. I'll read it.
Appreciate that. You heard it here on the TowerCast Podcast. We had the amazing Giancarlo Esposito, and just look at all of his work. If you haven't, you must have seen him in something amazing that he has done. And the projects, we just named 2 of the amazing projects that he's got coming in the pipeline, down the pipeline. So just keep an eye out for his work. He's an amazing human being, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.